Hello listeners, and thank you very much for choosing to listen to this podcast that we've recorded for you. Today we're going to be talking about contract development, and we're lucky enough to have secured an excellent procurement professional in Roger Holloway. So firstly, thank you very much, Roger, for taking the time to do this for us this morning. And could you possibly just introduce yourself and a little bit about your career to the listeners, please?
Yes, sure. Hello, listeners. So I'm Roger Holloway. I've worked in procurement for about 25 years now, and that's in a mix of private and public sector roles. I started out in a sort of entry-level operational buying role, and I've worked my way up over the years. I'm currently head of procurement at the University of Lincoln. Been in that role for about the last 7 years now. Did my CIPS exams around 15 years ago, and I've supplemented that with a master's in procurement.
Wow, so yeah, really a proper, true procurement professional through and through. So we are lucky to have Roger on the call today. So as we're going to be talking about contract development this morning, Roger, can you tell, please, a little bit about a key contract that you've had to develop and how you approach this, please?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to talk about a project that in my current employer at the university. So we've established a new medical school in Lincoln in the last sort of couple of years, and we needed a new purpose-built building to house the specialist medical training facilities. There were sort of library spaces and social teaching space in there, and it was a really high-profile strategic project, both for the university and for my procurement team as well. So we needed a sort of large building on the campus, and the project had a build cost of around £16 million. Obviously, we needed to get a main contractor for the construction works, and we procured that via means of a competitive tendering process. So, big project like this has a sort of large stakeholder group to inform the building design and requirements. But when we got to the sort of procurement stage, we had a much smaller team actually, and we had people from my team in the procurement function. We were working with a project manager from our estates team, and we supplemented that with some external construction industry consultants, quantity surveyors, etc. We didn't have any sort of legal people on the team because we actually used a fairly standard construction form of contracts, and we could deal with most of the issues ourselves. Would it be helpful if I talked a little bit about the tender process that we used?
Yeah, that would be really good, please. As much information as you want to share. Yes, please.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so obviously we needed to do a tender process for this. So one of the things that we had to think about was the capabilities of our potential contractors. There was a lot of things to think around with that. So one of the first things that we needed to think about was trying to assess the sort of right experience and track record of contractors who've dealt with buildings worth £16 million, and you need a certain scale to be able to do that.
Yeah.
We're also looking into sort of some of the normal things like references, are they reliable contractors, etc. Some of the other things that we had to have a look at was the sort of financials of the potential tenderers. Are they going to be financially stable? There's a big build. We're talking a 15-month build period. And also there was potentially going to be defects and snagging at the end of it. So we wanted to make sure that somebody was going to be around for the long term to deliver that project. And obviously, if you're dealing with a £16 million building, there's lots of materials and labour that's needed for that. And the tenderer that we appointed needed to be able to cash flow all that as well.
Yes.
Some of the other stuff that we needed to look at in terms of the sort of tendering was sort of looking at the technical competence of the contractors. Can they meet the timescales that we're working to, and also program requirements? Thinking about how they select and manage subcontractors, that's really important in construction projects. What were they like with site health and safety? Obviously, it's really critical. And one of the things that's really important this day and age on construction projects is environmental matters. Thinking about how they're going to dispose of the waste on site and energy efficiency in the building design. So there's lots of sort of considerations before you even get to sort of commercial stuff around cost and risk allocation. Yeah. Would it also be helpful if I talked about a little bit about what we did from a contract development point of view as well?
Yes, please, absolutely.
Okay, great. So for the actual contract terms, we actually use something called the NEC suite of contracts, and that's used a lot in public sector construction schemes. The NEC offers a standard form of contract wording, which is why you don't typically need too much in the way of legal input, but there's still lots of decisions and choices for us to make. So one of the biggest decisions that we had on this particular project is whether we went for a fixed price contract or something that allows like a pain and gain share mechanism.
Yeah.
We ended up going with a fixed price project in the end because we had a fairly fixed budget for it, so we didn't really want to take any risk around that. Other sort of things that we had to think about from a contractual point of view was the sort of liability limits that are relevant to the project. Contract risks are always important in any contract. A construction project, one of the key things is setting delay damages if the building is delivered late, which is obviously a major concern, so we have to think about that. We also had a process for sort of managing defects and snagging issues that inevitably can arise with a big construction project. So that's a little bit of info, really, the sort of things about how we develop the procurement process and the contract itself.
That's really useful, Roger. Thank you. And whilst I experienced that you have got a wealth of experience, and I'm not suggesting that anything did go wrong, but were there any significant challenges at all within this project and the development of the contract that you had to try and work through?
Yeah, there were. I mean, one of the big challenges that we face is the university is subject to something called the Public Contracts Regulations, and that's the public sector procurement law. And that means that we can't negotiate with our tenderers and bidders in the same way that the private sector can do, because we have to treat all our bidders equally in the first place and be transparent in our decision making. So that really means that you've got to get everything contractually, it's got to be fully developed and ready at the point that you go out to tender. You can't be leaving important matters for future negotiation. And that really means you end up having to spend a lot of time sort of planning up front as to how we're going to assess the tender responses, and also making sure that when we issue out a draft contract that we've got most of the key issues that are nailed down. And obviously some of the bidders do come back and say, well, we're not happy with the liability levels, and there's always a complex tension between what a commercial negotiation and staying within the boundaries of public procurement law, and it's not easy sometimes. So we just about managed to get it right, I think, on this project.
Yeah, sounds a real challenge, and like you say, within the public sector, transparency is key, isn't it? And you have got a lot more red tape, as it were, that you have to work to than if you were doing this for a private project.
Definitely, yeah, definitely.
And it sounds like you did a lot of due diligence and a lot of groundwork prior to the contract actually being sort of signed off and ready to go. Did all that work pay off, and were you able to mobilise the contract on time?
Yes, we did. I mean, projects like this, a new building, it's not something you could be late on in terms of the procurement activity. It was a really time-squeezed project, this one, and we had some very busy weeks indeed trying to make sure that we got the tender out according to the programme, and also that we awarded on schedule so that the building construction could actually start as planned. But ultimately, it was tight at times, but we got the procurement completed on time, and we got the contract signed on time, and they managed to get started on site as the programme required it. So yeah, we're pretty happy about that, to be honest.
Oh, that's great news. And whilst I appreciate a lot of hard work's been undertaken, am I right in presuming that once the contract has mobilised and things are rocking and rolling, it's important for you to keep an eye on how things are going? And if that's a right assumption, can you tell me how you continue to manage the contract as it evolves, please?
Yeah, sure. It is a right assumption. Obviously, if you've got a £16 million build going on site, you can't just sort of step away and leave the contractors to it and hope they get it right. So construction projects probably a little bit different how we do other contract management, but for this particular project, we have dedicated project managers within our estates department, so they're not actually part of the procurement team, and they manage that contract. So there's a lot of engagement with the contractor in terms of managing the program, managing how the site is going, and we also engage external quantity surveyors to help us manage the commercial and payment side of things, because there's a lot of admin and commercial admin under the NEC contracts, and you really need somebody who's actually close to the project and knows what's going on site, and you need some dedicated resource to that, and certainly that's not something we can do from a procurement point of view. And I guess the proof's in the pudding. The building is due to open next March, and we're in November now, and it's currently on schedule. So it looks like everything's been going well, and we're managing it, and hopefully we've got the right contractors to do that work.
Great stuff, great news. I look forward to catching up with you probably off record just to see how it's doing, Roger, because obviously we do talk professionally now and again, so I'll be checking up to see how that building's going, and maybe taking a cheeky drive by at some point just to see what it looks like.
Sounds good.
Well, thanks ever so much for your time. Really appreciate it. I know how busy you are working at the university, and especially at the moment with lockdown, we've all got extra pressures to deal with. So sincere thanks from myself and from CIPS, and from no doubt the listeners that will have gained a lot of insight from your knowledge you've shared on this podcast today. So thanks very much, Roger, and take care.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Thank you.